Imagine waking up one morning to find that your life savings are worth half of what they were yesterday, that the currency you earn, the banks you trust, and the nation you call home are collapsing in slow motion. Not because of a natural disaster, but because of one man's decisions. This isn't a scene from a dystopian film, it's happening right now, in the world's largest country. For the first time since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia is facing a financial crisis so severe it could rewrite its future. Sanctions have drained its oxygen, the ruble has lost its soul, and its economy, once powered by oil, gas, and global trade, is suffocating under isolation. This is the untold story of how Russia's economy is crumbling from within, how sanctions turned into silent weapons, and how ordinary Russians are paying the ultimate price for the Kremlin's ambitions. To understand why Russia is unraveling, we need to start with something invisible yet vital: trust. Every modern economy is built on it. People deposit money into banks because they believe they'll get it back. Businesses take loans because they trust the currency will hold value. Governments print money because citizens trust them not to destroy it. But in Russia, that trust has vanished. When Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, he triggered more than a geopolitical earthquake. He ignited a financial one. Almost overnight, Western nations froze hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian assets. Global banks severed connections. SWIFT, the backbone of international finance, cut Russia out. In that instant, the Kremlin lost access to the world's arteries of trade and currency. The immediate effect was shock. The ruble plunged nearly 40% in weeks, forcing the Central Bank of Russia to impose emergency capital controls. The government banned citizens from transferring money abroad and capped how much foreign currency they could withdraw. But the real damage wasn't in the numbers, it was psychological. Russians began lining up outside ATMs, desperate to withdraw cash before their accounts froze. Panic spread. The system that promised stability was breaking its own promises. And once that trust was gone, everything else began to unravel. For a brief moment, Putin's government appeared to recover. The ruble bounced back. On paper, the currency even strengthened against the dollar. Russian media hailed it as the strongest currency in the world. But this was an illusion, one built on artificial controls, not genuine strength. Behind the scenes, the central bank had simply forced major exporters like Gazprom and Rosneft to convert their foreign earnings into rubles. It also banned the free trade of currency and locked capital within the country. In other words, the ruble didn't rise because the economy was healthy. It rose because no one was allowed to sell it. As months turned into years, the artificial scaffolding began to crack. Inflation soared past 17%, interest rates spiked, and consumer goods disappeared from shelves. Western brands like Apple, McDonald's, and IKEA pulled out, leaving behind ghost stores and black market replacements. What Putin called economic sovereignty was really economic suffocation. Sanctions have become the silent weapon of the modern era, and Russia is learning how powerful they can be. Since 2022, more than 16,000 sanctions have been imposed on Russian entities, individuals, and sectors. That's more than Iran, North Korea, and Syria combined. These sanctions don't just target politicians, they target the lifelines of the Russian economy: oil exports, banking systems, semiconductor imports, shipments of advanced machinery, even microchips for washing machines, which Russia now cannibalizes to repair tanks. The US, EU, and G7 allies hit Russia's financial core by freezing $300 billion in foreign reserves and banning access to Western capital markets. This means Russian companies can no longer borrow cheaply, refinance debt, or attract global investors. For ordinary Russians, it means jobs are vanishing, prices are climbing, and the ruble, though numerically stable, buys less every week. One Moscow analyst compared it perfectly. Russia is like a body still moving after the heart has stopped beating. For decades, oil and gas were the beating heart of the Russian economy. Energy exports funded nearly 40% of its federal budget. Every pipeline, every tanker was a lifeline connecting Moscow to the global economy. But sanctions struck where it hurt most: energy revenue. Europe, once Russia's biggest customer, began cutting itself off. Germany halted Nord Stream 2, the multi-billion-dollar gas project that was supposed to guarantee Moscow decades of leverage. The EU introduced oil embargoes, and the G7 imposed a price cap of $60 per barrel on Russian crude, a move that slashed export profits nearly in half. To bypass this, Russia built a shadow fleet, old tankers with hidden ownerships and fake destinations. But even this workaround can't escape economics. Transport costs skyrocketed, insurance premiums tripled, and India and China, now Russia's biggest buyers, demanded steep discounts. The result? For every barrel sold, Russia earns roughly 30% less than before the war. In 2021, oil and gas brought in $340 billion. By 2024, that figure had fallen below $200 billion. Not because Russia isn't selling, but because the world isn't paying what it used to. This collapse in energy income has drained the government's budget, forcing the Kremlin to raise taxes, slash social programs, and raid state funds to keep the war economy alive. Russia's economy has transformed from a market system into a wartime command structure. Factories once producing cars now build drones. Civilian industries are being redirected toward weapons manufacturing. Putin's solution to falling revenue has been to print and borrow. But that only deepens the crisis. To sustain the war, banks have been forced to give loans to state-backed companies, even when they can't afford it. These loans rarely get repaid, leaving banks loaded with bad debt. The Russian central bank knows this, but has little choice. It can either expose the truth or maintain the illusion of stability. And so, every month, the illusion grows thinner. Meanwhile, the ruble's collapse accelerates. In 2021, a dollar bought 70 rubles. By 2025, it buys more than 120. Imported goods cost double, sometimes triple. A simple smartphone or laptop now costs as much as 2 months' wages for the average Russian. What used to be middle-class comfort has turned into survival math. Step outside Moscow's elite neighborhoods, and you'll see what economic collapse really looks like. In provincial towns, supermarket shelves are half empty. Local teachers make the equivalent of $200 a month, barely enough for food and utilities. Pharmaceutical shortages have become widespread, with many essential medicines imported from Europe now unavailable. And yet, official state TV continues to show images of prosperity, construction projects, parades, new malls. But the truth on the ground tells another story. Empty storefronts, decaying infrastructure, and people hoarding cash at home because they no longer trust banks. Surveys show that over 40% of Russians now keep their savings in cash, hidden in safes or under mattresses. They remember 1998, when banks closed overnight and their rubles turned to dust. For many, history is repeating itself. As the economy collapses, the Kremlin's grip tightens. Access to Western media is blocked. VPNs are banned. Even messaging apps like Telegram and WhatsApp face disruption. To replace them, the government has launched its own surveillance-friendly app, Max, advertised as a patriotic alternative but widely known to be a monitoring tool. Young Russians have protested this quietly, but dissent has a price. By restricting the internet, the Kremlin isn't just silencing opposition, it's isolating its people from the global economy. Online freelancers can't work with Western clients. Small businesses can't access digital payment systems like PayPal or Visa. Russia has become an economic island, cut off from the currents of innovation and commerce that define the modern world. In a digital age, that's a death sentence. When people lose access to information, opportunities, and wealth, despair grows quietly until it becomes cultural. Since the war began, the sale of antidepressants in Russia has hit record highs. Mental health clinics are overcrowded, and suicide rates are rising, particularly among men returning from the front lines. Meanwhile, corruption remains unchecked. Officials accused of embezzlement are stripped of assets only when they fall out of political favor, their wealth simply reabsorbed into the Kremlin's vaults. Putin's regime is feeding on its own elite to survive, confiscating assets from oligarchs to fill budget gaps. For the rich, it's no longer safe to be rich in Russia. Russia's economic decline doesn't happen in isolation. It's reshaping global markets in subtle but significant ways. Energy prices have become more volatile as Russia reroutes its oil eastward. European nations, once dependent on Russian gas, have accelerated their transition to renewables and alternative suppliers like Norway and the US. Ukraine's grain exports, once trapped by blockades, have rerouted through new corridors, shifting global trade patterns. Even China, Russia's supposed ally, is quietly recalculating. While Beijing buys Russian oil at steep discounts, it offers little financial aid in return. China sees opportunity in Russia's weakness, not partnership. In essence, Russia is becoming a junior partner in a relationship it once hoped to dominate. The people paying the price for all this aren't oligarchs or generals. They're ordinary Russians. Families who can't afford food, pensioners whose savings are evaporating, students who can't buy textbooks because Western publishers left the market. Inflation has devoured the value of wages. Prices for basic necessities, eggs, milk, bread, have doubled in 2 years. The black market thrives. Barter is returning. And while official unemployment remains low, that's only because the government counts anyone mobilized for war as employed. In reality, millions of Russians have dropped out of the workforce entirely, either through conscription, migration, or despair. More than 1 million people, Mostly young professionals have fled since 2022, draining the nation of its brightest minds. This brain drain is one of the most devastating, invisible consequences of the war. A nation that loses its innovators loses its future. As of 2025, the ruble's decline has reached existential levels. Despite the central bank's desperate measures, selling reserves, hiking interest rates, and restricting currency trade, the currency continues to fall. The reason is simple. Confidence cannot be legislated. You can't force people to believe in a currency they no longer trust. And now, even gold, long seen as a safe haven, has become restricted. Russians can only take 100 grams abroad, around $15,000 worth. For oligarchs, that's pocket change. For ordinary citizens, it's another wall closing in. The ruble, once a symbol of national pride, has become a symbol of confinement. It's money you can't move, can't trust, and can't escape. Russia's crisis is not just economic, it's civilizational. The country that once spanned 11 time zones, projected power across continents, and sold energy to half the world, now faces a paradox of its own making: isolation by design. Sanctions didn't destroy Russia. They revealed what was already broken. Corruption, dependency on oil, demographic decline, and authoritarian control have all converged into a perfect storm. The Russian economy still functions. Factories still run, soldiers are still paid, goods still move. But the foundation beneath it is hollow. And as history shows, hollow empires eventually collapse from within, not from without. There's a saying, you can't bomb an economy into prosperity. Yet, that's exactly what's happening in Russia. An entire nation trapped between propaganda and poverty, fighting wars it can't afford to win. The tragedy is not just in the numbers, GDP, inflation, debt, but in the people quietly enduring it all. Teachers unpaid for months, young Russians leaving their homeland, families saving cash in jars because they no longer trust banks. This is more than a financial crisis. It's a national reckoning, the slow implosion of a system built on fear instead of trust. And history will remember that long after the ruble stops printing and the oil stops flowing. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dive stories about global economics, power, and the unseen forces shaping our world. Because behind every number, there's a human cost.